She didn't scream when the dog started digging. She didn't cry when the dirt turned black with rain. She only whispered, "I didn't mean to leave him." But it was too late. The dog had already found the grave. And everything she had hidden was about to come back. It was the kind of town you didn't find on purpose. One gas station. One diner. A closed-down hardware store with the letters Sons and Co. peeled halfway off the front sign. And a silence that felt too old to be from just a lack of people. The woman stepped out of the sedan, left the engine running. The dog didn't wait for a command. He jumped out and stood by her leg, alert, quiet. They had a rhythm now. The kind forged in long silences and longer drives. She clutched a single folded photo. Wrinkled from handling. Smoothed 1,000 times. Folded, unfolded. Held up to strangers, pinned to bulletin boards, ignored by most. Today would be no different. Probably. She walked into the gas station, bell jangling faintly above. The man behind the counter looked up slowly, middle-aged, flannel shirt, glasses pushed too low on his nose. She held up the photo. "Have you seen this boy?" His brow furrowed. Not recognition, calculation. He looked from the photo to her. Then to the dog. No reward? No. Then no. He went back to his crossword. She stepped back outside. The wind had picked up. Early October. Leaves not quite dead yet. The dog sniffed toward the trees at the edge of the highway. She crouched beside him, whispered without emotion. "Do it again, Reuben." The dog looked at her. Blinked once. Then padded forward, heading toward the tree-line. She followed. 2 miles in, the trees swallowed the sound of cars completely. Only birds now. And the rustle of pine needles beneath boots. Reuben walked without hesitation. His nose hovered close to the ground but didn't quite touch it. He wasn't tracking a scent in the traditional sense. He was looking for memory. And guilt. 3 towns ago, he'd stopped cold in front of a boarded-up church. Another time, in front of a bus stop bench with a rusted outside. Places the woman had never been. Places the boy in the photo had definitely never been. But somehow, Reuben always knew which places she couldn't walk away from. This time, the trees narrowed. She stopped when she saw it, an old campsite fire ring, long since collapsed, stones scattered. Her legs buckled before she even meant to sit. Reuben stood still. Watching her. She took out the photo. The boy was smiling. Missing front tooth. Holding a toy plastic shovel. She touched the corner of the image and whispered, "You love that stupid shovel." The wind howled low through the trees. Reuben sat. He didn't dig. Not yet. She leaned back on her hands, staring up through the trees. Flashbacks didn't come in cinematic waves. They came in short, sharp stabs. The car door slamming. The boy laughing. The sound of thunder far away. The voice on the phone saying, "It's only supposed to be 2 hours." And then, nothing. She hadn't told anyone how it happened. Not even the therapists. Not even the search teams. Not even the boy's father, wherever he was now. The official story was an accident. A missed turn. A broken phone. A storm. A panic. But the truth? The truth was simpler. She'd left him. Reuben let out a low, short bark. Not warning. Confirmation. He walked 5 paces away and stood still. Looking down. No digging. No scratching. Just looking. The way he always did when something important was under the surface. She stood slowly. Approached. At first, it was just dirt and leaves. Then she noticed the flatness. The unnatural patch of moss that didn't match the surrounding forest. Her breath caught. She reached for her phone. No signal. Didn't matter. She didn't plan to call anyone. Not yet. She dropped to her knees and brushed the moss away. Her fingers met something hard, not rock. Not wood either. Plastic. A rounded edge. Her stomach turned. She stood abruptly, stumbling back. Reuben watched her without judgment. He never judged. Her voice cracked for the first time in days. I didn't mean to leave him. In the moment the words left her lips, Reuben pawed at the soil once. Just once. Then stopped. That was his signal. This was the place. The woman sat down in the leaves again. Hands in her lap. Reuben sat beside her. The woods were silent. Except for one thing. Far off, from somewhere behind the trees. A soft creak. Like a door swinging on a rusted hinge. Or a memory shifting in the dark. She didn't move. Didn't cry. Just pressed her forehead against Reuben's shoulder and whispered. Show me. Open. It was the plastic handle that finally broke her. The red grip, once bright, now sun-bleached and cracked, jutted from the earth like a finger pointing upward, asking the question no one else had dared. She didn't scream. Didn't gasp. Just stared. Her hands hovered over the dirt, not yet ready to pull. She could still see him holding it in the photo. Grinning. Digging little holes in the campsite just to bury toy soldiers. He'd named it Excalibur. Reuben didn't move. Didn't nudge her or whine. He'd been trained not to push. But he didn't look away either. He watched with those calm, dark eyes, the ones that had pulled her through night terrors and cold motel rooms, waiting for her to decide. Because this moment had to be hers. She gripped the handle with both hands. Gently at first. It resisted. Years of soil and moss had claimed it. She pulled harder. It slid out with a soft pop, clumps of dirt trailing behind like old guilt refusing to let go. Beneath the space where the shovel had been, the soil looked darker. Not freshly disturbed, but compact in a way that said something had once rested there. Something small. She set the shovel aside. Her breaths came shorter now. She wanted to run. Wanted to erase the last 10 minutes. But that wasn't why she came. She hadn't admitted it before, even to herself. But she hadn't come to look. She'd come to find. Her fingers pushed aside more moss. Then her hand hit something else, smooth, cold. Plastic. She dug faster, clawing with her palms. Dirt packed under her nails. A corner emerged. Then a side. Then a lid. Yellow. Cartoonish. A lunchbox. It had stickers, faded beyond recognition. But she remembered applying them with him. In the back seat of the car. Right before the trip. She opened it slowly. Inside, nothing but air and black mold. But she crumbled anyway. Her head fell into her hands. Not crying. Just sinking. Her back curved like the weight of it all finally caught up. Reuben moved closer. Sat against her side. She didn't move away. Minutes passed. Maybe more. The forest remained still. Like it knew. Like it respected the silence. Eventually, she rose. Left the lunchbox beside the hole. Stood on shaky legs. Then turned, not back toward the car. Not toward the trail. Toward the deeper trees. And Reuben followed. She didn't know exactly where she was going. But Reuben seemed to. He walked slowly, nose low, but not touching the ground. The way he always did when he was tracking something old, something emotional. Something tied to her. They passed a rusted signpost buried in ivy. The letters were barely readable. Camp Evergreen, closed 1997. A memory pierced through. The summer they took the trip. The year she'd said, "Let's do something different." The weekend she got the call from the office and drove 2 hours back to town. And left him. Just for the night. She clenched her fists. Not from anger. From shame. From the cold realization that no one had ever asked her what happened when she came back. Only where he'd gone. And when the search didn't turn up a body. They'd stopped asking. Now, as she passed the broken archway of the old camp entrance, Reuben stopped. He turned sharply. Sniffed the air once. Then headed toward an old row of cabins, broken roofs, doors half off the hinges. The second one on the left still had a number plate. Cabin 3. He stood at the door and pawed once. She opened it. Inside, mold and leaves had claimed the space. A broken bunk bed. An overturned chair. A crumpled sleeping bag still zipped. And carved into the wooden frame above the bunk. R+M=best team. Her throat tightened. He'd left her a note. A message. Right here. She'd never seen it. No one had checked the cabins that first week. They'd searched the woods, the lake. Not the beds. She ran her fingers over the carving. Softwood gave way under pressure. Like it wanted to remember. And Reuben sat in the corner of the room. Waiting. Always waiting. She turned to him. "I left him here, didn't I?" Reuben blinked. Once. Then looked down at the floor. She followed his gaze. There, faint lines in the dust. A square shape in the wooden floorboards. She knelt again. Lifted the corner. A crawl space. Dark. Narrow. But dry. Inside, just beneath the lip of the opening. A single boot. Tiny. Worn. Children's size. Her hands began to shake. Not from fear. From recognition. It was his. The one with the tear on the side. She remembered him tripping on the gravel path, crying, then laughing again. She held the boot in her lap. Reuben moved beside her, resting his chin on her leg. No barking. No digging. The search was done. Now came the part where she had to face it. She looked at the boot. Then at the space beneath the floor. And whispered, not to Reuben. Not to the forest. But to the child that had once waited for her. "I'm here now. I found you." She didn't remember sitting down. But she was on the floor again, knees tucked to her chest, the boot still in her lap. It was strange how grief didn't scream when it arrived. It settled. Soft as dust. Heavy as stone. Reuben had curled up beside her, pressed against her hip, like he understood the weight of it all. Maybe he did. He had been with her for years now, trained not just to detect panic attacks, but to track emotional shifts, to ground her when she spiraled. But nothing in his training could have prepared him for this. The boots still had pine needles stuck to the sole. She picked them off, slowly, methodically. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. 0 bars. Of course. She turned it off. She wasn't ready to call anyone yet. The police. The coroner. A journalist. Her sister. No one could give her what she needed. Because what she needed wasn't an answer. It was to be told. You were right to come. And no one would say that. Not when they knew the whole story. She stood up, legs stiff, joints tight. The old cabin creaked around her. She turned toward the broken desk in the corner, the kind camps used to keep journals and flashlights in. Half buried under dust and leaves, she found a small rusted metal box. Curiosity beat hesitation. She pried it open. Inside, Polaroids. Faded. Water-damaged. Campers in matching shirts. Staff members smiling beside a lake. Then, one photo made her hand stop. It was the boy. Her boy. Grinning in front of cabin 3, holding a paper flag. The date on the bottom, July 3rd, 1997. Her hand shook. That was the last day she saw him. Reuben stood now. He walked toward the doorway and looked out, ears perked, nose slightly lifted. She stepped toward him. "What is it?" He didn't bark. Didn't move. Just stared at the treeline. A soft hum of a car engine in the distance. Too far to hear clearly, but Reuben sensed it. She grabbed the lunchbox from earlier, the boot, and the photo, then ducked out of the cabin and into the trees. They moved deeper into the forest, not running, but fast. Not out of guilt. Out of instinct. Someone else was coming. And she didn't want to answer questions. Not yet. They reached a rocky overlook she remembered from the trail signs. A flat ridge above the campgrounds. The town was barely visible between the breaks and pine. She crouched, breathing hard. Reuben lay low beside her. Below, a white SUV crept slowly down the gravel road that led toward the old camp. Unmarked. No sirens. No decals. She squinted. Male driver. Sunglasses. Talking on a cell phone. The way he drove, slow, scanning, it wasn't random. He was looking for someone. She waited until the SUV disappeared into the woods. Then stood again. She didn't know who he was. But she knew how people looked when they were on official business. And that man hadn't looked official. He looked curious. She needed time to think. Time to decide. She turned to Reuben. "Back to the car," she whispered. He turned instantly, nose to the trail, leading her with confidence. Not urgency, familiarity. Like he'd memorized every tree on their way in. As they neared the original spot where they'd found the shovel, she stopped. Kneeling by the moss again. The soil was still disturbed. But now she knew, the grave hadn't held a body. Just pieces. Scattered signs. Clues. The boot. The lunchbox. The carving on the bed. All of it was leading her somewhere. But not to a corpse. To something else. To understanding. To forgiveness, maybe. She took one long look at the site. Then pulled out the folded photo from her coat again. Ran her thumb across the boy's face. "I'm not leaving this time," she whispered. She drove into town just before noon. The diner was still open, 2 trucks outside, 3 patrons inside, all with baseball caps and farmers' tans. She walked in and found the payphone near the restroom hallway. Dropped 2 quarters in. Then stopped. Fingers hovering above the buttons. She had the number for the local sheriff's office. Had memorized it on the drive-in. Her thumb hovered over the 5. Then curled away. She hung up the phone. Turned. Outside, across the street, the white SUV had parked. The man from the forest was standing outside it now, leaning on the hood. And staring directly at the diner. She froze. Reuben moved beside her, his stance subtly shifting. Protective. Not aggressive. Just alert. The man didn't move toward her. Didn't smile. Just stood there, eyes behind dark lenses, like he was waiting to see what she would do. She walked back to the car without looking at him again. Opened the back. Reuben jumped in. She slid behind the wheel. The engine started. So did the SUV. She pulled out of the parking lot. So did he. A slow chase. Not fast. Not reckless. Just enough to confirm what she already suspected. She wasn't the only one who remembered that camp. And someone else had waited a long time for it to stay buried. The road out of town twisted like a question she couldn't quite answer. She kept the car steady at 35 miles per hour, not fast enough to raise suspicion, not slow enough to feel like surrender. In the rearview mirror, the white SUV matched her perfectly. Always 3 car lengths back. Never weaving. Never flashing lights. He wanted her to know he was there, not to scare her. To test her. Reuben shifted in the passenger seat. He wasn't panting. He was watching the mirror too. Always the mirror. He'd begun doing that somewhere around Missouri, when a gray sedan had followed them from a rest stop to the next highway turnoff. Same pattern. No plates worth reading. No erratic driving. Just shadows. She told herself it was coincidence. But Reuben hadn't. The road narrowed again, trees leaning in close. No shoulder. No turnouts. She reached for the old map on the dash and traced a finger toward the next junction, a T intersection about 7 miles out. There was a fire service road to the left, barely used. She'd have to risk it. 6 minutes passed. The SUV still behind. Never passing. Never pulling away. At the junction, she didn't signal. She turned sharply, wheels crunching onto gravel and leaves. A sign, half buried in vines. FS72C, no through access. Perfect. The path bounced her suspension hard. Reuben adjusted silently, steadying himself without complaint. They'd done worse roads. Abandoned orchard lanes. Overgrown access trails. He knew how to balance. How to ride the silence. The forest deepened, pressing close. Mossy rocks. Deadfall logs. No signs of human life. She pulled to a stop just past a break in the ridge. Cut the engine. Waited. The SUV didn't appear. 5 seconds. 10. Then, headlights peeked through the trees. The vehicle rolled slowly around the bend and came to a stop 30 feet behind her. Engine still running. She didn't move. Didn't open the door. Reuben sat up straight. Ears up. Tail still. Waiting. The man stepped out. Not quickly. No weapon. No badge. He wore jeans, a dark windbreaker, boots with fresh mud. Mid-40s. Athletic, not military. He kept one hand in his jacket pocket. The other held a cigarette. He lit it without speaking. Blew smoke into the cold air. Then, finally, spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." She opened her door. Didn't get out. Just stood half-shielded by the frame. I could say the same. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Just nodded once toward her car. "That dog's trained." She said nothing. He stepped forward a single pace. "I worked with dogs. Government program." "You?" Still nothing. He took another drag, then flicked the cigarette away. "Camp Evergreen wasn't your first stop. You've been to 2 others." She gripped the door tighter. "How do you know that?" He ignored the question. "You've been chasing breadcrumbs. Personal ones. Following him." He pulled something from his jacket. A laminated photo. Her son. She stepped out now. No fear. Just rising heat behind her eyes. Reuben moved forward, standing between them. Tail stiff. Posture neutral, but alert. The man crouched slightly, not toward her, but toward the dog. "He's the key, isn't he?" They trained him to track emotional signatures. Not just sense. She stayed quiet. But her jaw tightened. The man nodded, standing straight again. They never shut the program down. Just went quiet. Changed hands. The K9s, the real ones, they were phased out. Only a few made it into private use. He looked at Reuben. And you got one. She took a slow breath. What do you want? His voice lowered. I want to know what he found. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. Whatever you think you uncovered, it's not over. The camp was only one part. She stepped back once. He's gone. He's been gone for 25 years. The man tilted his head. Then why does the dog still lead you to places he's never been? That made her pause. She looked at Reuben. He was watching the man. But not the way dogs watched strangers. It was the way he looked at hotel rooms before they entered. At fields before they crossed. As if something whispered just before she could hear it. The man held out the photo. You're not the only one who lost someone. Her voice cracked. Then why follow me? His eyes flicked toward the trees. Because you're waking things up. Things we spent decades burying. A pause hung heavy in the forest. Birds quieted. Even the leaves seemed to hold their breath. Then Reuben barked. Once. Not at the man. But toward the trees behind him. Toward something neither of them had noticed. A faint trail. Overgrown. Barely visible. The man turned slowly. You feel that? She nodded. Because she did. Something was waiting up that path. And it had waited a long time. The man stepped back. I'll walk behind you. I'm not here to stop you. But I need to see what he left behind. She looked at him hard. And finally asked. What was his name? The man exhaled. Jacob. My son. 1998, cabin 4. Her stomach sank. That was the cabin next to hers. The one she'd never entered. She looked down at Reuben. His tail flicked once. Decision made. They began walking toward the path. No one spoke. Because this wasn't about words anymore. This was about what dogs always knew. That memory doesn't vanish. It waits. Buried. Quiet. And sometimes it barks. The trail was barely more than a suggestion. Roots like knuckles. Branches clawing at their sleeves. And that smell, old pine, wet soil, and something else. Something human. Reuben didn't hesitate. He didn't pull ahead, didn't bark. He just moved steadily, ears twitching, nose low. As if he'd walked this path before. But that was impossible. She'd never been this far into the woods. The man behind her, Jacob's father, didn't speak much. Every few minutes he would glance over his shoulder. She noticed. Expecting someone, she asked. He didn't answer. Just said, not someone. Something. After 10 more minutes of climbing, they saw it. Cabin 4. It leaned to one side like it was tired of standing. The number barely clung to the lintel, a rusted metal form surrounded by creeping ivy. The door hung askew, hinges bent, bottom edge eaten by rot. She stopped. Reuben stopped too. The man stepped forward, slower now. She looked at him. You're sure this is the one? He nodded once. I was here. Once. Reuben moved first. He padded up the creaking steps, nose twitching at the door. Then sat. Still. Focused. She followed. Every step felt heavier now. Like she was carrying more than her weight. Inside, the air hit her with a memory she couldn't place. Dust. Mold. Ash. The walls were still standing, mostly. A bunk bed. Mattress long gone. A shelf with a broken lamp. And on the far wall, drawings. She walked toward them. They were faint, faded from sun and years. But they were unmistakably drawn by children. Stick figures. A dog. A sun. A row of handprints painted in red. 7 handprints. Each smaller than the last. Below the prints, names. Jacob. Milo. Tara. Ben. Lacey. J.R., and one smeared out. She traced her fingers under each name. The man stepped closer. He found his sons, Jacob, and froze. Reuben barked once. They both turned. He stood now at the back corner of the room, where floorboards were uneven. The dog pressed his nose to the gap between 2 planks. Then looked back. Not a question. A direction. The man crouched and pried up a loose board. Below, a narrow space filled with crumbled notebooks, drawings, and a single metal lunchbox, identical to the one she had found earlier. He lifted it gently and opened it. Inside, a cassette tape. Labeled in a child's messy handwriting. Last night. Do not watch alone. She and the man exchanged glances. There was a camera, she asked. He nodded grimly. They were recording sessions. For behavior studies. Conditioning trials. The kids never knew. She gritted her teeth. And your son? They told me he ran away. But he left that tape. Somehow. He slid the tape into his coat pocket. They took only a few things, the tape, the drawings, a torn piece of bedding stitched with initials. J.R. Not hers. Not her son's. Someone else. Someone not on the list. Outside, Reuben sniffed at a path behind the cabin. Not wide enough for a road, but too deliberate for animal trails. The woman looked at the man. There's more, isn't there? He looked exhausted now. There's always more. I just didn't know someone else was still listening. She crouched beside Reuben. What now? The man scanned the horizon. There's an old ranger station 3 miles west. My contact can digitize the tape. She hesitated. What if it shows something we're not ready for? He looked at her seriously. It's already too late for that. The sky had begun to darken when they started walking again. As they crossed the ridge, she looked back one last time at the crooked cabin. It looked smaller now. Like it had given up holding secrets. Reuben nudged her leg gently. A signal. Time to move. Halfway down the trail, her phone buzzed. 1 bar of signal. A text. Unknown number. You found him. Now they'll find you. She stared at the screen. Showed it to the man. He didn't react. They already knew we were coming. She looked to Reuben. He wasn't watching the trail anymore. He was watching the trees. The silence had changed. The forest no longer felt like it was holding its breath. It felt like it was waiting to speak. The ranger station appeared like a ghost through the trees. Log walls. A slanted green roof missing 2 shingles. A solar panel hung limp from its brace, cracked in the corner. Inside, the musty air reeked of mildew and insulation. But it had power. A single panel was still connected to a car battery. Enough to charge the old cassette player the man carried in his pack. They sat in silence as he threaded the tape in. Reuben lay at her feet, head resting across her boots. He hadn't moved since they'd arrived, but his tail occasionally tapped the floor, like a metronome trying to steady the tension. The man pressed play. Static. Then a child's voice. Are we still being recorded? Another voice, female. Calm. Professional. Yes, Milo. That's part of our evening check-in. Can I say hi to Mom? A pause. Let's talk about how today went instead. Then the faint sound of crying. And another voice. They said we'd go home after this. Who told you that, Tara? Jacob. The woman's breath caught. She clutched the edge of the desk. The man leaned forward, staring at the speaker as if willing the voices to come alive. Then another voice. A whisper. Barely audible. The dog's not like the others. The tape hissed again. He knows things. He won't let us leave. The woman blinked hard. That voice, she knew it. It was hers. She stood suddenly. Knocked the chair over. The man looked at her, eyes wide. That was you, he said quietly. She shook her head. I don't remember. I was never there for testing. But Reuben stood too now. Not alert, not defensive. Just tense. As if a string had been pulled. The man pressed stop. They stood in silence. Then he said, You weren't listed. No files. No photos. I was just visiting, she said. Just dropped him off. He didn't reply. She turned to Reuben. Kneeling, she gripped his harness gently. Why did you bring me here, boy? He licked her hand once. Then walked across the room. To the desk. To the pile of children's drawings. He pulled one out with his teeth. Dropped it at her feet. It was a crayon sketch. 6 stick figures in a row. 5 kids. 1 dog. And beneath it, in blocky print. Reuben, our guard dog. She sank to her knees. The man crouched beside her. These kids weren't just part of a study. They were watched. Held. She stared at the drawing. Reuben wasn't trained later, he was there. With them. The man sifted through the drawings. More images showed the same dog. Sometimes outside a door. Sometimes in a circle drawn around the children. Then a photo fell loose. A group shot. 6 kids. A staff member at the back, tall, pale, in a red jacket. And standing next to him, Reuben. Younger. Same eyes. Same scar near the nose. The woman's hands trembled. She whispered, I thought I adopted him from a rescue shelter. The man gave a dry laugh. Maybe you did. But maybe he rescued you first. A sudden noise from outside. Crack of twigs. They froze. Reuben's ears snapped forward. His body tensed. He growled, low, rumbling. Not a warning. A confirmation. The man motioned to the back door. They moved fast. No flashlights. No talking. Through the trees, a figure passed between the trunks. Not running. Walking. A long coat. A pale silhouette. Too far to see clearly. But Reuben stared. Didn't bark. Didn't chase. Just watched. The woman whispered, Who is that? The man shook his head. Someone who doesn't want us listening. They circled back toward the trail. Fast, quiet. Reuben led again, this time leading them through denser brush, avoiding clear paths. His breathing was steady. Trained. Calculated. But something about his posture was new. Almost possessive. They didn't stop until nightfall. Camping in a hollow beneath a ridge, the man built a small, smokeless fire. They shared a protein bar in silence. The woman held the tape in her lap. I was on the recording, she said again. I don't remember it. But it was me. The man nodded slowly. The camp ran for 3 summers. Each year they tested a different age group. If you were a sibling, a guest, even a volunteer, you might have been exposed. She thought about that. Let it settle. Then asked, what were they testing? The man stirred the fire absently. Obedience. Memory. Fear retention. They were trying to find out what made some children forget trauma, and what made others remember too well. Reuben lay between them. Awake. Watching. Not resting. Not anymore. The woman looked up at the stars. I thought I came here looking for him, she said. The man raised a brow. But? She shook her head. Now I think I came because he brought me. Because he remembered. She reached down and scratched behind Reuben's ear. He leaned into it. Closed his eyes for the first time that night. And for the first time, she whispered to him. You didn't let go of me. Even when I let go of him. The map from the ranger station was old, faded and water-damaged, but it had one marking neither of them could ignore. A spot labeled only, Memory Circle. No trails led to it. No buildings nearby. But someone had drawn a faint arrow beside the ring. And beside it, in handwriting similar to the one from the lunchbox tape. Where it ends. Where it starts again. They set out just after sunrise. Reuben led. No hesitation. His paws pressed into the frost-dusted earth without sound. She carried the drawing. The man carried the tape player. And between them, silence. It took over 2 hours to reach the clearing. No signs. No landmarks. Just an unnatural flatness surrounded by trees grown too evenly apart. In the center, a large, smooth stone. About 4 feet across. Covered in moss and pine needles. The woman crouched and brushed it clean with her sleeve. Faint carvings appeared. She blinked. Their names. The man knelt beside her. She read them aloud. Milo. Tara. Ben. Jacob. And then, her son's name. Etched just a little deeper than the rest. Trembling, she ran her fingers over the grooves. Below the names, another symbol. A dog's paw, carved at the base. Reuben stood just outside the circle. He didn't step in. He just stared. Ears up. Body still. She rose and walked to him. Is this where you were made to remember? She whispered. He looked up at her. Didn't blink. Just stood sentinel. The man walked the perimeter. Stopped at one side where broken branches had been laid long ago in a ring. Some were burnt at the ends. He lifted one. Charcoal rubbed off on his palm. This was a fire circle. She nodded slowly. A ritual site? Maybe. But not for them. For us. She turned toward the center again. This is where they were tested. He gave a slight nod. Where they watched what the dogs would do when children were scared, isolated. They wanted to see if memory could be manipulated. She whispered, they thought the dogs would forget too. Reuben took a step forward now. Just one. Then barked, once, short and sharp. The woman turned quickly. What is it? The dog padded forward again. To the stone. Then to the edge of the woods behind it. He stared at a patch of ground beneath an old tree. They followed. The dirt here was softer. Reuben began to dig, not frantic, but purposeful. 2 paws. Then he stopped. He looked back. The woman stepped forward. Kneeling, she brushed away more earth. A box emerged. Metal. Locked. The man crouched and pried it open with a pocket knife. Inside, files. Photos. Notes. Audio reels. Labels. He pulled one out and read aloud. Subject 7, Control Specimen. Emotional Anchor, Reuben. Behavioral Override, Successful. She stared at the document. That's my son. The man scanned the rest. The dogs weren't just watching. They were being paired. Paired? Imprinted. To carry memory across trauma. Reuben wasn't trained to find him. He was trained to be with him. Always. She stepped back, her knees weak. The idea was so simple, so cruel. They'd given children dogs not as comfort, but as recording devices. As emotional mirrors. And when it ended, when the camp closed, they sent the dogs back into the world. But the dogs remembered. She looked at Reuben. You stayed with him, didn't you? His tail moved once. The man found one last sheet in the box. A report. Dated August 1998. Final subject removed, deceased. K9 refused recall. Terminated, marked AWOL. The woman's heart stopped. She grabbed the page. The K9 listed was R43, Reuben. The status, missing. Presumed destroyed. But he hadn't been. Somehow, he'd escaped. Found his way back. To her. I didn't mean to leave him, she whispered again. But now it felt different. Not just guilt. Gratitude. For the one who hadn't left. The man packed the files. These need to be seen. She looked up. To who? To whoever's still listening. There's more like Reuben out there. She nodded. But her eyes never left the dog. She walked over. Kneeling again, she pressed her forehead to Reuben's. You waited 25 years. He licked her cheek. Once. Deliberate. Like punctuation on the end of a sentence she'd avoided for too long. They left a circle behind. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the stone. Covering the names again. But not erasing them. Just like memory. It doesn't vanish. It settles. And sometimes, it digs itself back up. The fire was small, just enough to keep the cold away. They couldn't risk smoke. Not after what Reuben had sensed. He hadn't barked again. But his posture had changed. No more tail flicks. No more relaxed shoulders. Now, every creak of the woods drew his eyes. Every snapping twig sent his ears pivoting. He was guarding her again. The man unfolded the map. They had 4 satellite camps. 2 were shut down. 1 burned. The woman flipped through another folder, stapled reports, heavily redacted. I thought this ended in the 90s. He shook his head. They never stop experiments like this. They just rename them. Bury the outcomes. Start over somewhere else. She sighed. They'll come for the files. He nodded. They already are. She sat beside Reuben. He leaned gently into her hip, a quiet gesture of comfort. Of endurance. She whispered, I need people to know. The man stared into the fire. They won't believe it. Even with documents. They might. And if they don't? She looked down at Reuben. Then we make them listen anyway. An hour passed. Then Reuben's head snapped up. No growl. No bark. He just stood. Faced east. Toward the woods. The man followed his line of sight. A faint shimmer of movement, barely visible in the shadows. Then nothing. The woman stood slowly. Someone's here. The man handed her a shortwave radio. If we get separated, channel 3. She took it. Slid it into her coat. What's the plan? Hold the evidence. Let Reuben lead. I'll circle around. Before she could object, he was already gone, fading into the trees like a memory. She looked at Reuben. His tail was rigid now. His gaze fixed. She whispered, "Let's move." They headed west, away from the circle, toward a rocky incline. The old ranger trail twisted here, mostly forgotten. Reuben weaved between trees with purpose. Then, behind them, a snap. Not a branch. A footstep. She turned but saw nothing. The radio crackled softly in her pocket. She didn't answer it. Not yet. They reached the ridge. From here, the town lights could be seen, tiny, distant glows in a sea of black. She crouched, pulling the files from her bag. Reuben sat beside her, facing the woods. Always watching. Suddenly, movement to the left. Two figures, slow, deliberate. She ducked, heart pounding. Reuben growled low, a rumble that vibrated through the soil. She tightened her grip on the folder. "No one takes this from us," she whispered. The figures passed below the ridge, not coming up, just watching. She couldn't see faces. But she knew what they were. Observers. The ones who'd let it happen the first time. The radio buzzed again. This time, she answered. Channel 3. Static, then the man's voice. "They're watching. But they're not acting. Yet. Why? They're waiting for the handoff. They think we'll run. Burn the evidence. We're not going to." A pause. "Good. I've got a vehicle half a mile east. Meet me at the logging road." We disappear. Then we publish. She clicked off. Turned to Reuben. "Can you get us there, boy?" He didn't need asking twice. He moved. She followed. The forest shifted as they moved, quieter now. Less alive. As if the trees themselves were holding breath. Waiting to see if the truth would escape. 20 minutes later, headlights blinked once in the distance. The man. She exhaled in relief. Reuben barked once, sharp, clear. But then. A shot. She dropped. Reuben stood over her, still and unflinching. The man's voice shouted through the dark. "Go!" She bolted toward the light, Reuben at her side. Another shot rang out, closer now. The headlights grew. They reached the truck. Doors flung open. She dove inside, clutching the files. Reuben leapt in behind her. The engine roared. The man reversed hard, spinning gravel. Through the mirror, a figure emerged into the open. No gun now. Just a notepad. He lifted it. On the cover, a symbol she recognized. The paw print. The same one carved into the stone. She stared until the tree swallowed him. Then turned to Reuben. "You brought us back so we could finish this." Reuben blinked. And for the first time in days, he rested his head in her lap. The man drove without speaking. They left the forest. Left the circle. But they carried it with them. In folders. In memories. In Reuben's silent, unfailing presence. They weren't running anymore. They were carrying. And the weight of truth was finally shifting. From buried. To undeniable. They hadn't spoken much during the drive. The man focused on the road. She focused on Reuben, her hand resting on his side as he lay across the back seat. Every bump of the highway felt like memory. Every turn like an echo. The motel was the kind of place people forgot existed. Off a service road, tucked behind a shuttered diner. Room 4. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. The man set up the laptop on the desk and connected to a prepaid hotspot. He moved like someone who'd done this before, maybe too many times. She sat on the edge of the bed, cradling the cassette player. The tape hadn't left her coat pocket since the circle. Reuben lay beside her, finally breathing deeply. Not asleep. Just still. The man spoke first. Upload will take a few hours. Then we go dark. She nodded. What if they pull it down? They will. But someone will see it first? He nodded again. Someone always does. She looked at Reuben. He found it. All of it. Not me. Not you. The man turned from a laptop. They underestimated the dogs. Always did. Treated them like tools. She stroked Reuben's fur. But he remembered. They spread the documents out on the bed. Photos. Case files. The children's drawings. The carved names from the stone, sketched by hand. And her son's photo, the one Reuben had brought her to. She placed it in the center of the pile. What do we tell them? She asked. The man was quiet. Then, the truth. She gave a bitter laugh. Which part? The experiments? The lies? That they use dogs as memory carriers? All of it. She looked down. And me? What if they find out I forgot too? He met her eyes. You remembered enough to come back. That's all that matters. The upload bar ticked slowly. File after file. One reel from the tape had corrupted. But the voices had made it through. Milo. Tara. Her son. And herself. 12 seconds of her voice as a child, whispering into the darkness. Don't let him take us again. She didn't remember saying it. But Reuben did. He'd carried it, in every paw print, every bark, every night he'd slept by her side when she didn't know why the nightmares came. She whispered to him now. You came back for me, didn't you? He looked up, eyes soft, blinking once. Then licked her hand. A knock at the door. She froze. Reuben stood instantly, not barking, just staring at the door. The man walked to it and checked the peephole. He opened it slowly. The motel owner stood there, a woman in her 60s, holding a wrapped sandwich. No room service here, she said gruffly. But I feed anyone traveling with a dog that well-behaved. The man nodded and accepted it. She smiled at Reuben. He's seen things. Dogs like that always have. Then she left without another word. They shared the sandwich. Reuben got the biggest half. She laughed for the first time in days. It caught her off guard, light, but real. As the sun rose, the man showed her the screen. Uploads complete. It's seeded. Mirrors online. No one can bury it now. She nodded. The files had been renamed, indexed, protected. They were out. Whoever had watched from the woods. They would have to watch from the shadows now. Because light was coming. She stepped outside onto the cold concrete walkway. The sky was gray. The world still. Reuben stood beside her. She crouched and wrapped her arms around his neck. Not desperate. Just sure. Thank you, she whispered. For not forgetting him. For bringing me back. Behind her, the man packed the last of the papers into a fireproof case. He glanced out at them, the woman and the dog, and for a moment, allowed himself to believe that this time, they might not be too late. Inside, the laptop beeped. A new email. Anonymous sender. No subject line. Just a single sentence. He remembered more than you ever knew. The man stared at it. Then looked at Reuben through the window. The dog was watching the tree lean again. Not afraid. Just aware. The woman looked down the road. Toward where the woods began again. She knew they could never go back to the way things were. But they weren't meant to. Because sometimes, healing doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it means remembering together. And in that quiet morning light, with truth finally free and the road stretching on. She knew they had one last stop to make. One more place Reuben needed to see. Because he hadn't just found the grave. He'd found her. And now, together, they'd find what came next. They drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly between cornfields and fence lines. Reuben sat in the back, head between his paws, ears flicking every few minutes. He knew where they were going. Maybe he'd always known. The woman held the photograph in her lap, the last one taken before everything had changed. Her son's grin. A makeshift paper flag in his hand. The number 4 faintly visible in the corner of the cabin behind him. They pulled off a county road and turned onto a gravel drive, overgrown and faded. A weathered sign leaned against the trees. St. Mercy's Rest, EST 1891. No cars. No people. Just wind. They stepped out quietly. No words exchanged. Reuben padded forward and sniffed the air. He walked down the narrow path of crooked stones and mossy plots until he stopped at a half-sunken marker. A small, flat slate. Unmarked. She joined him. The man waited back by the gate. Her knees folded beneath her without resistance. She laid the photograph beside the stone. "This was yours," she whispered. "Even if they tried to take it." Reuben sat beside her. Not leaning. Just present. Solid. Unmoving. She brushed her hand across the moss. No engraving. No date. But the stone pulsed with something real. Something held. And for the first time since finding the box in the woods, she let the tears come. Not out of guilt. But release. Because some memories aren't erased. They're just buried. Waiting. She reached into her coat and pulled out one final thing. The folded note. The one Reuben had brought her to from the very beginning. "Please don't split us up again. We remember. And we wait for her." She pressed it flat against the stone. "I didn't understand before," she said. "But I do now." She looked at Reuben. "You were all waiting for someone to come back." He blinked once. Then lay down beside the grave. Head on his paws. Eyes soft. The man stepped forward. Set down a smooth rock beside the note. "There's an old tradition," he said. "Leave a stone, carry a promise." The woman nodded. Together, they placed 5 more. One for each child from the drawing. Milo. Tara. Ben. Jacob. J.R. And one more. For the ones without names. They stood there as the sun lowered behind the hills. The wind picked up. Not cold, just enough to move the leaves. Reuben rose and took a single step toward the field beyond the fence. Then paused. Looked back. Waited. She followed. So did the man. Beyond the cemetery was a stretch of open land, untended and wild. Reuben stopped halfway through. Turned in a circle once. Then sat. At his feet, a small depression in the ground, surrounded by tall grass. Not a grave. Something older. A hiding place. She knelt and cleared the grass away. Just beneath the soil was a plastic case. She pulled it up. Opened it. Inside, a collection of hand-drawn pictures. Faded, but familiar. The same ones from the ranger station. Only this time, one had her son's handwriting on the back. "If you ever come back, we'll be here." She pressed the paper to her chest. Then looked at Reuben. "You saved these." He didn't move. Didn't blink. Just sat there, calm as the setting sun. She folded the drawings and tucked them into her coat. The last remnants of a forgotten promise. And this time, she intended to keep it. Back at the car, she turned to the man. "You'll go public?" He nodded. "I'll protect the others. Help them understand what happened." "And me?" "You already did what they said was impossible." She smiled. "Remember?" He smiled back. "No. You came back. That's harder." They loaded the gear into the trunk. She looked out one last time across the field. The graves. The wind. The circle now complete. And Reuben. Sitting by the car door. Waiting. Just like he always had. She knelt down beside him. Rested her head against his. "You can rest now," she said quietly. "You kept the memory alive." His eyes softened. And though he could never say the words, she heard them just the same. "So did you." Together, they got in the car. The road ahead was long. But for the first time, it felt like a beginning. Because where memory endures, so does love. And Reuben had never forgotten either.